Color psychology is simply defined as the way how different colors have different meanings, connotations, and psychological effects on human perception. Today, we'll be looking at the use of the color blue in Persona 3 as we attempt to understand how the creators use the color to tell their story. One might wonder, why is color psychology even necessary in the first place? Well, within marketing and advertising, color plays a significant role in brand identity, as it is necessary when companies must identify a personality they wish for their brand to adopt, often done through colors. It's also important in customer identity. If one acknowledges that color influences perception, then color can be used along with a brand to influence how customers identify with it. This allows a brand to easily target and influence its customers. Blue is an interesting palette to analyze, as it's often depicted as a safe color. According to wixanswers.com, blue provides a sense of security and dependability. Therefore, it is used by brands that manage a lot of personal and sensitive information, like American Express and LinkedIn. Within the same article, the words trust, high-tech, reliability, and security were stated to be the most commonly associated words with blue. But why is that? Many sources cite that the commonplace presence of blue in nature may be a huge reason as to why it may be accepted without much rejection. Blue is present in our skies and can be easily found within oceans and pools. Blue is safe, and because of its long history of being perceived in this light, it can be viewed as conservative and traditional. Now, we just spent some time looking at blue from its commonplace or possibly just positive perception. But what if blue was used to invoke feelings of melancholy, sadness, despair, and even symbolize the cold presence of death? The Persona series has a bold way of setting their games apart from others, and that is primarily done with the use of whatever main color is chosen for each entry. When I first saw Persona 3, I imagined that a looming coldness might be associated with this title, but I never imagined that death, apathy, and hints of nihilism would find themselves taking root in the game. Persona 3's use of blue hues, complemented by green shadows, immersed me within moody storytelling that I did not think blue could do. The use of blue as a symbol for death and the afterlife is a recurring theme in Persona 3, and is an integral part of the game's narrative. Throughout the game, the player encounters various characters who have had experience with death and the afterlife, and blue is used to represent this connection. One of the most notable examples of blue representing death in Persona 3 is in the design of the game's dungeons. That is, within the Tartarus Tower. Now, Tartarus in Greek mythology is a part of Hades where the enemies of the Greek gods were punished. Yet, when playing Persona 3, that is one of the main areas you traverse in. The blue lighting used within the dungeon serves to create a cold, sterile atmosphere that symbolizes the emptiness and lack of life associated with the tower. The use of blue hair serves to emphasize the idea that these dungeons are a representation of death and the afterlife. It's also worth noting that death literally walks the halls of Tartarus, waiting for you if you've been there a little too long. Blue, all of a sudden, doesn't seem that safe anymore. Another example of blue representing death is in the design of the game's characters. Many of the game's characters have blue clothing or some sort of blue color associated with their design, which serves to symbolize their connection with the world of death and the afterlife. For example, Makoto, or the main character, is depicted with blue hair, which can be interpreted as a tie-in to his familiarity with death, an eventual sacrifice that takes place at the game's end. Furthermore, the dark hour occurs every night, and ordinary civilians are put into comatose states. However, once the player decides to journey to Tartarus in the dark hour, there is a clock animation that counts down to this event, where upon the strike of 12, it symbolizes the start of the dark hour, or your journey through Tartarus. While Persona 3 is clearly crafted to use blue at its full depressing advantage, the team at Atlus did not invent this use for the color. In art, blue is often used to create a mood of sadness and melancholic reflection. This can be seen in the use of blue hues in landscapes, portraits, and still lifes, where the color serves to create a sense of solitude and introspection. For example, the famous Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh used blue to great effect in his paintings, including the famous Starry Night, where the blue hues of the night sky and the stars serve to create a mood of quiet contemplation. Interestingly enough, in a recent Atlus installment, we got a being known as the Nahobino, a being that is whole once two of its separated aspects reunite. The main colors of the Nahobino are navy blue, white, and black, but they sport an impressively well-shampooed blue set of hair, and oftentimes their contrasting shine of blue with the dull wastelands of post-apocalyptic Japan adds that sense of familiar loneliness and coldness as one traverses the lands. I also find death represented through a character known as Pharos to be particularly interesting. At first glance, he is nothing more than a mere pale child that has strikingly blue-colored eyes. He is dressed in nothing but prison clothing, and perhaps his very presence symbolizes our bond or imprisonment with death. What is even more striking is his young appearance, which possibly shows us that death is not limited by any factor and can claim all whenever it feels like. He is also, quite literally, an incomplete manifestation of death within the story. Pharos means lighthouse in English, and lighthouses can be used as a guidance symbol within stories. Coincidentally, Pharos somewhat leads our protagonist to his eventual destiny, where he must make the ultimate sacrifice. Perhaps a lighthouse can even be used as a symbol of death and rebirth, standing as a somewhat end-of-the-tunnel figure that also shows us the path for new beginnings. Persona 3 overall moves past that heavy theme and instead encourages the player and general audience to not be chained down by the inevitability of death. The story, while very dark at times and full of moments to contemplate, ends on a positive note of making our lives matter due to the bonds and connections we form, and possibly provokes the player to think about the things left behind when death finally comes around. Persona 3 is not afraid of its identity, and despite its middle child status in the franchise, its character-focused narrative meshing with the use of dynamic colors set a trend for the franchise that led to its success.